Hey, Carol. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome, guys, to another episode of the RevOps and ABM alignment. I'm here with Carol Chen, but actually, I leave it to you, Carol. Give us a introduction of with who we have the pleasure to geek out today about RevOps.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'm Carol Chen. I'm the VP of Revenue Operations at Flywire. I've been there a little over 2 years, but really been in revenue operations for probably the last 10 years. I started in sales operations even before it was coined as a real position, a real role. Before back then, it was, a mix of combination of words like business operations, just general operations. But yeah, so I've been in it a good 10 years. And I'm really excited here to talk about RevOps today to the team and answer any questions that you guys have.
Great, thanks. Just for you guys to know, Carol is VP of Revenue Operations at Flywire. She worked previously in WeWork and in dozen of other organizations. So if you check her LinkedIn profile, you will be amazed. But I would like to go back and scroll down here, and I see that you started in finance. So how you end up from finance uh, to RevOps, and is there any connection there?
I would say that, when you go to school, you also don't have like majors like RevOps. So I chose a very generic and broad a topic like economics. And so after I graduated, I wanted to be in the finance industry. So I found a great job with one of the largest financial data vendors, Thomson Reuters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just started it. And then I went from vendor to vendor. So Thomson Reuters to FactSet and then to S&P Capital IQ. And it's really at S&P Capital IQ that I started uh, seeing this new role appear as like where the business really needed to understand how it's doing, how we're forecasting revenue, how we can use tools like Salesforce to really understand what we're doing, how we're doing, and how to pull different data sets together to, see risk and things like that. So I would say, even though I was in the finance industry at S&P Capital IQ, it was that role that really helped me understand what it was to really try to start in a role like sales operations. Because at the time, S&P Capital IQ was actually buying Salesforce to roll out for its entire organization, which was like over 3,000 users at the time I was there. So that's when I got my first taste, I would say, of Salesforce and
Mm-hmm.
all that it could do. And I just wanted to do more. So after S&P Capital IQ, I chose a really small startup called Axial, and I was head of sales operations or operations manager at the time. And that's when really I started building out what really is sales operations. So understanding how quotas are assigned for sales rep, aligning territories to quotas, figuring how lead optimization should go, like how do we route the leads, what are great quality leads, then starting to understand like what data we wanted to capture in Salesforce. So that gave me, because I was the sole person on it, that gave me like all the views of being a sales operations person in that role. So I was really glad to be able to, see different facets of what is the need for each of the different businesses.
Yeah, I also have this impression that initially it was sales ops and then it transformed somehow in RevOps, even
Mhm.
though we as marketeers we don't want to admit that that it was it was first sales. But I'm just wondering, like, because you have much bigger experience than me in RevOps, when did the whole shift through from sales ops started to go to RevOps, and why do you remember that?
Yeah, I'd probably say maybe 7 years ago. I think there's a whole general shift, right? And I don't think it started with sales ops going to RevOps. I think it started from when heads of sales would become chief revenue officers, so CROs,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And so chief revenue officers now are looking at the end-to-end cycle of understanding how revenue flows, right? What's happening before it becomes an opportunity, what's happening during the opportunity, and what happens after they become a client, managing that existing revenue book of business. So
mm,
I think as those roles have changed, right, having one person look over all of the revenue cycle, this role has changed to adopt to support that role better. So these sales ops roles that were usually focused just on the sales process now have also expanded to RevOps to align with the CRO to support more of a end-to-end function, right? So I'm looking now at like, how much are we spending in marketing and what's the ROI? How do we get higher ROI? And then also towards the end, right, after they sign with us, making sure that the clients of ours are transacting with us and we're hitting the expectations we did when we signed the client. So
mm.
um, I think that shift has happened like 5 to 7 years ago, but it's now becoming more and more popular as I think the like LinkedIn has a stat like RevOps is now a more popular title than sales ops, and so is the other one, right? CSO to CRO.
Yeah, so basically, if we would look at the hierarchy, then the RevOps would be somehow under CRO, right?
I think it could be under a few different functions. I've had different reporting lines. I've reported
Mm-hmm.
into finance, the CFO. I've reported to the president. Reporting now to the chief marketing officer.
Oh,
Also,
wow.
many cases of reporting into, like you said, the CRO. So it depends. I think it's how the organization is set up that really determines where the role fits.
Okay, so like from your experience, let's do an exercise here. When to implement RevOps? This is the biggest question that people have. Like some say, "Oh, I'm too small of an organization to even start thinking about it. So I need to have like what should I look at? Should I look at ARR? Should I look at how many sales reps do I have? Because maybe I don't have the ARR yet. I want to have the ARR with the sales reps, right? Or the motions. Should I look at the revenue? Should I look at what's that indicator? What are those variables that tell me, okay, so now it might be a good time where you need to think of at least one person to start building the RevOps team.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually get that all the time too. So not surprising you get it too. I think the one of the things I think about is what is the scale that you're growing at and where do you want to be? I think that, RevOps has many different ways to start. Is it, do you hire one person and what level it is and what's the different role that they do? Because,
Mm,
just to give a little background for RevOps that I've managed, I have like 5 different functions. I
okay.
have just the go-to-market operations, which is like supporting sales operation functions traditionally. And then I have all the insights and analytics. I have tools. So every sales and marketing tool that we use sits under me.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And then I have sales enablement and then also sales compensation. So,
Oh, wow.
when you think about like when to start, I think, when you have a few reps, like even a handful, it's time to
Mm-hmm.
start because you want someone to manage your Salesforce instance. Because if you don't, and then it's garbage in, then it's garbage out, right? Or you don't get the fields you're actually trying to track, right? So then you don't understand how the business can grow better. What's your ideal customer profile, right? Or what's your win rates, or why are you losing deals? Why are you winning deals? So I think, the earliest I would say, you should start thinking about it is when you have a few reps and you have a Salesforce instance or another CRM instance to manage, because you want to
Mm-hmm.
start collecting that data to understand the business better. And then, and then you slowly build out the other functions as the business grows, right? And then you can decide when you actually need like a real function within RevOps as it's carved out as its own function, as opposed to, a Salesforce admin can sit under anyone for the time being as businesses scale.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned about sales enablement, and I started to think, okay, so we build this team, but what should be first? Like, I know it's a chicken and the egg type of a question, but should I focus on, I don't know, forecasting and making sure that's really in place and my analytics, right? Or should I focus on sales enablement and adoption for those sales reps? Like how would you start? Because, okay, I have the sales reps, I want to build the revenue ops, but what would be like a 101 steps to this whole function?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, maybe forecasting isn't I think forecasting can be handled with the sales manager or head of sales. I think they have a good pulse on the forecast. It's just not as probably as data supported, but it's more of like how the deals are doing. They know the insights. So maybe more art than science.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, if you feel like the sales team could need some coaching based on how the product is selling, or you see that we're falling behind specifically like at product demo or deal negotiation, something like that, then maybe it is a good time to think about someone in a sales enablement function, or carving out time to get training either externally from a consultant or internally if there's a superstar salesperson or the sales manager wants to step in. So I would say it's different for each of the businesses. It depends on how, where you're falling short and need that extra support.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah. I'm asking this because lately I was in a situation where a CEO would ask, okay, I need to figure out my forecasting so I know what do I do with my resources, right? So do I hire more, or do I stall, or do I do layoffs? What do I do? Because a RevOps person, I need a RevOps who can tell me more accurately these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than sales enablement, which is more about the training and the adoption, right? So I need to figure this out. So um, that's where my question is coming from. And do you think that is it even possible to from forecasting to answer these type of questions to the higher management, or should be should be the RevOps answering these kind of questions of resource management and where to allocate the money at the end of the day?
I'm super biased, so I'm going to say RevOps 100% of the time, because RevOps will be basically backing it up by facts, right? So like,
Yeah.
if you're trying to get to this ARR revenue number and your average sales team or average sales rep does X quota, right? And so you just divide by that head count to get to that, number. So that's very formulaic driven. And, if we had the data, we can easily do that. Maybe a head of sales would look at it differently. So I think, again, maybe going back to your question, feeling like still my bet always is let's hire a Salesforce admin at first. Like if that's your first hire to build out RevOps function, that's the person, especially as you're growing. And then, second is maybe an analytics person just to help you analyze the data and answer these questions, right? Like, how many heads do I need for next year, or what's the pace that we're growing at, or based on my current run rate, where will I end? So those are things analytics can do, which is what we do. And then you can see like how the rest of the org is, where the gaps are, to just try to fill those in the end. But usually orgs that are young, that are trying to build out rev functions, they're a lot scrappier. So some people can take on the roles of multiple things. So if you have someone super strong in analytics within the org, maybe then you don't need an analytics person. Because I always consider, like, as you're a startup, every dollar is super important on where you invest in. So, sometimes you have to share a lot of roles and wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah, and this is where the question comes from, like, where should I invest in? Okay, so I just want to go back to the sales, because you said that the sales would look at the whole forecasting and the resource allocation in a different way. Like how would they look at it compared to RevOps, in your view?
We pull very formulaically, right? So these are the number of deals, what's our close rate based on stage, right? We expect this to close, right? Based on obviously data that's in Salesforce, like close date and things like that. Maybe sales leaders would have obviously they have more insights into the deals than RevOps does. So they might handpick a few deals as opposed to just run it based on how we convert by stage and by close date and by rep.
Okay, got it. And the question that many of us have is there a blueprint to RevOps, or is it really like you went to different organization, different stages in the organization, different industries? Like, can we do a blueprint by stage, or is it more like business model, or is more like industry, or is there any blueprint to RevOps?
I think you can do one by size. So, like, for example, Axial was a startup, right? So I was one person for all of the RevOps, SalesOps needs. But we also are doing a lot less of everything, right? So territory planning, sales quotas was like for 5-10 people, right? As opposed to for larger organizations, we're doing it for maybe 100 people, 100 sales reps. So I think there is, based on the size of the org, you have a different blueprint, right? So if you're really small at the startup stage, then you're hiring 1 to 2, and that's pretty much your RevOps team. As you grow, then you would grow out the function. So, on the largest end, I've had 60 people on the team under RevOps.
Wow.
And, currently they're, yeah, right. So it's also based on how the business is. If you're selling a lot of products, the contracts are super complicated, pricing is difficult, it could require a lot of support from RevOps, like, because all of those teams are probably asking for different things, right? All the sales reps are asking for different things. You have such a large selection of different products to sell from and different pricing. So and with all of that complicates everything, right? Your Salesforce build out, your compensation plan, your analytics, everything then becomes like one product becomes its own little like path, right? And then, but I would say, like, depending on the size you would have of the company is how you would determine the RevOps team. So like, we're around 300, 400 in general. I'd say like we're around 10 to 10 or so, still growing. So, as you grow the business, you would scale it, but on the smaller end, you can survive with 1 or 2.
Because the big question, I think, that till like Series B companies have is, should I have internal RevOps or should I have an agency, right? Because this is like, maybe I just need to fix some things and that's it, or I need to have support from time to time. So how do you see it? Like when's the best role of an agency in a RevOps, let's say, when does a company need actually an agency versus someone internal, or is there a hybrid model even, or how did you see it in the organization where you worked?
Yeah, so I think that in the obviously if you're super small and you can't afford internal hires, then and you can only, you feel like you only need a few hours a week, then the outsource contractor slash agency is the best way to go from a dollar wise.
What is super small for you?
So in my mind, super small is like the 50 million,
50.
50 at the highest end, I would say under 100, but that's like slightly pushing it too. So
In revenue or in employees, you mean?
in revenue.
Revenue, okay.
Yeah. So I think in my mind, and in my mind, I'm thinking, I call it super small because I'm thinking about when to build up revenue operations,
Yeah.
not how the market might define super small, right?
Yeah.
But so like when you're like at 50 million in revenue or so, if you can't afford that one or two headcount, and you don't have a lot of needs, or you haven't someone internal that can, do dual roles, then maybe going with an agency is fine. Also, sometimes when you have a big overhaul, like you're rebuilding Salesforce as the instance, or you're implementing CPQ or something like that, then it's also a good time to use an external vendor or agency, because those are one-time projects, right, that need a lot of manpower at the time, but you don't need it going forward after the project is done. But otherwise, I would always encourage to hire internal, because some of the things that I've seen with having external RevOps people is that the turnover on the external side can be high because they're not full-time. And so there's a big knowledge gap that you have to fill every time there's turnover. And it's not, you're always if there's turnover, you're always then training them up again.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of time wasted rather than time spent on really like digging deep to come up with like improvement.
Got it. And I'm also curious about pre-IPO and post-IPO in terms of dynamics of RevOps, because what I have a feeling that people start to push a lot pre-IPO RevOps, right? There is a lot of things that people want to improve and the numbers to be good and really dig into things. So I just want to validate my assumption with you. Is that the case, or how is it later on in post-IPO? Is the dynamic changes somehow?
That's totally the case for the companies I've worked with and my experience. So pre-IPO, it's not as, I would say, organized or process-driven, or guidelines are the same. Rules can be, let's call it, flexible at times when they're pre-IPO. You might pull a deal in that's signed on the 1st, or you might do something else. But the time to ramp up to that pre-IPO processes need to be put in place, validations need to be put in place, approvers for discounts, for changes to opportunities need to be put in place so that, when you do IPO, that all the numbers are clean, defendable, and auditable, because you will be, right?
Yeah.
So there
So
is a big change. There is a
yeah,
big ramp up to get there as well. And there's definitely a difference between pre and post.
I mean the stakeholders change a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
yeah, I think winning by design was talking a lot about this growth at all costs, and this happens pre-IPO, right? So that's why maybe retention or was not that of an importance before this so uncertain times. Like a lot of companies are pumping into growth and new customer acquisition. How do you see this change of dynamics with the economical shift that it's happening, like from the growth at all costs, right, to more of a retention? Do you guys feel it like with your peers? How do you see the dynamics nowadays with all this uncertainty in the economy and after the layoffs, the tech layoffs, which were, I don't know, last year, right?
Yeah, I think definitely everyone is taking a more of a focus on the existing business, right? Um, the existing business is, I'd say, from a cost basis, easier to keep than the cost it is to sign new business, right? So you always want to make sure the existing business has a focus and has a high retention rate, because if you keep signing new business but your accounts keep canceling, then you're never growing, right? It comes in at the top of the funnel and then leaks out at the
Yeah,
end. So
yeah,
you have like a leaky bucket. So it is important to retain current clients, and I think people are taking a bigger focus in that. Like, now there's a shift in the mindset of in the past they were like account managers, just more reactive to the business, to the client and what their needs were. But now there's a focus even in terminology of the role, right? Customer success, right? Because they want you to be the client to be as successful as possible using the product or service that they're providing. So I think there is a mind shift of, how can we maintain and grow the existing base, and what is that role profile to support that kind of difference in the original, where we're just reactive versus now we're proactive in maintaining and growing business.
yeah. And I think RevOps is also more focused on the right side of the bow tie, right? Like
Yeah,
where you
right.
have the existing companies. Um,
Yeah, I think
you
that goes
know,
back to how, sorry, I think that goes back to how, like, the shift of changing from CSO, right, to CRO, because now
mm,
someone is
yeah,
also looking at the revenue after the business signs that client up, right? So a full lens on the full cycle.
okay, interesting. And think in the future we will see maybe RevOps reporting to the customer success managers, right? Like to more of a right side of the bow tie.
Well, usually RevOps is reporting to whoever's running revenue,
Hmm.
or, other, I would call more neutral functions like finance or marketing or the president, because we are running all of the numbers. And usually, for me at least, I have commission and compensation under me. So there's a slight problem if you're managing compensation and your manager, the CRO, is being paid off commissions, right? There's a, a sort of little issue where someone reporting to you is managing your compensation. So it
Yeah.
depends. But yeah, I think that definitely the focus for RevOps is the whole everything, right? Before it becomes an opportunity, even before it becomes a lead, to after they're a client, and how their client health is.
Yeah, and I must ask a bit about the tools. I'm not interested in which tools you guys use. I'm just interested which side of the bow tie it's supporting. Like, what I again, to validate some of my suppositions. I believe that there is some kind of shift in trying to unify these tools. So one tool doing more things, just buying a tool for one single task, right? And looking more into the actual ROI and use case of those tools. It's not like we didn't look at that in the past, but I have a feeling that there is more emphasis on the actual financial benefits of those particular tools, right? Than productivity. I don't know, in the past, because SaaS companies were selling this idea of productivity, but now I have this feeling that first is revenue, right, and ROI, then the productivity. So how do you see the dynamics of overall being pitched with tools, or the shift, because the market changed, right, in terms of now focusing more on the keeping the customer, the retention, and I suppose that the pitch of the SaaS companies also changed when they come with tools. So how does this reflect to you?
I think your what you're hearing, what you're seeing is true. I have seen that. I am seeing that. So, for example, when we are looking at tools, we want to make sure that people are using it. So, the sales and marketing tools, all of those tools, that budget sits within RevOps, at least for the RevOps that I've managed, to ensure that there is ROI, because buying a tool, there's a lot of, let's call it, excitement when you get a tool, right?
Yeah, of course.
So we need this for XYZ, and if we don't have that, then we can do all of this, right? So you move forward, buy the tool, and then it sort of dies down. So I think that's common everywhere. And so, we want to make sure people are actually using it. So if we don't use it, then we should get rid of it, or buy a tool that actually does what is the problem that you were originally trying to solve, that maybe this tool doesn't support, right? And I do see that they're trying to combine, more tools into maybe one tool or two tools that you have, because it's less management on oversight for us, for RevOps, because every one tool you buy goes through, at least for public companies, the security and legal, and then from our level of effort comes from, like, okay, implementation, onboarding, training, then watching adoption, right? And so it's a lot. So if one tool can do more, we're always more happy to do that. It decreases the amount of work for many departments within a company, and then we can actually try to ensure, like, better usage on that, as opposed to, like, you have all these different scattered tools, and then you're trying to figure out, like, who's using what, when are they using it for, and what is the real ROI on them. So totally agree. Like, there is a movement towards, like, at least what I've seen is having one tool do more things, and then also ensuring ROI is met on the tools.
Yeah, and before we end, I just want to ask you, what are we missing in RevOps, like in your view?
What are we missing?
I think tools,
RevOps,
people, adoption, whatever, behaviors, skills, you name it.
Yeah, I think RevOps is built differently in each organization. So hard for me to say a general statement for all of RevOps, but I think I think one of the things that I see, at least from my experiences, is that you know, the investment in people in RevOps is a really good one because it actually returns multiple back to the business. So like, yes, RevOps is a cost function within the org, but really the return is so much more. So like, I would encourage people not to be afraid to start a RevOps function or to make that first account, because I always hear when to start. Oh, and I started too late, as opposed to, oh, I started too early, I shouldn't have started. Like, it never goes that way. So, so just maybe words of encouragement for people. Like, if you're thinking about starting RevOps, I'm guessing you're probably at the right time to start it. So don't be afraid to start that investment.
Yeah, and I think even if because the podcast is also about aligning RevOps with ABM, like I didn't see good ABM without RevOps. So I believe that having, because it's all about alignment, right? Like marketing, sales, customer success alignment, like ABM as a core does that. I mean, you need to align the teams to go after a particular account, right? And you have the same with RevOps. Like you look at the full buying journey, so you are in the center of aligning the teams, right? Like you need to align those teams towards revenue, and in this case, with ABM to close that particular account. So is this a fair characterization of RevOps and ABM alignment, or how do you see it?
Yeah, I think so, because all the, everything that RevOps has, like marketing operations, sales operations, customer success operations, like all of that is to support sales and their strategy for moving forward. And the execution is done through RevOps. So, I think they align very well together. And with the RevOps team in place, you can, run, let's say, this campaign, or, run this test, or, change the strategy, or whatever you think is best for the business. But like, RevOps would then take your strategy, actually put it into action items for all of the organizations to operationalize it and see it through to then measure output. So I'm 100% aligned.
Yeah. So when you run ABM programs, you guys, how's the relationship? Like, is there an ABM team and then they require your help and your support, or you are part of their let's say program or team, or what's the dynamics between ABM and RevOps from your like actually running the programs?
Yeah, so we have marketing leaders focus on all the verticals we have. So we have 4 different verticals we're focused on. They're like industries, like education, healthcare, and travel, and B2B. And so we have marketing leaders that support each one of them. And so the strategy is discussed between the marketing leads and the GMs who run that vertical. And then whatever the discussion is, then we, from marketing operations, then would try to fulfill it in either like building out campaigns or helping them run events, things like that. So, really align together, because all of marketing rolls into one, and so does RevOps. So, everyone is aligned to drive the same goals, right? We're trying to build pipeline and try to get deals closed that marketing can help support.
Okay, so I imagine it like some kind of squads per verticals, right? Like some teams, and then you have also RevOps people in those squads that later on support those particular strategies, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I think this type of setup where you don't have silos anymore, but you have these squads, and then you have sales, marketing, RevOps, maybe
Right.
even account managers in one team working on one vertical, and then you report on one metric, meaning the revenue at the end of the day, right? And
Yep.
everybody is transparent
Yeah, we're all
toward.
aligned, right? We're trying to drive
Yeah,
pipeline,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we're trying to get to a closed ARR revenue number.
Nevertheless, what I see and feel that there is some politics also, some in some organizations, right? That and that's why some companies want to have the silos, right? um, I suppose because of the KPIs, because if you don't have a very good RevOps in place, you don't have the visibility of the KPIs. So then it's really hard for me as a marketer to take responsibility of revenue, because you as salesperson, you don't know how to close the deals, let's say, right? Like it can happen, this kind of conflicts where um, you don't have alignment because you don't have the visibility, you don't have the KPIs, maybe you use different tools. So the thinking would be, why should I bring you the MQLs, you didn't convert them, so why should I take the responsibility of revenue, right? Like I suppose that this is something that you saw or you heard, or is valid. Why people don't why they need RevOps to, and what RevOps could solve, right?
Yeah, I do see it in organizations where they're a little bit more siloed, and they have different goals. But if you have the same goal and everyone is aligned and we're reporting on that goal, like, at a normal cadence, so for us it's like monthly, then it becomes less of a conflict, but more of a let's work together to get to this number.
Yeah. I think it's management matters a lot. So it comes from having the same goals from management, and
Yeah,
coming downward, right, to the organization. It's a vision. Yeah, I
yeah.
saw a meme like, don't work for a CEO who doesn't understand RevOps, um, which makes sense, right?
For me, yeah, maybe. I mean, the better
So
they understand it, or the more you can educate them, then the
yeah,
more they rely on RevOps, right? Because I really do think it's like a very powerful function for any organization who's looking to scale.
yeah. So with that, Carol, where before we end, where can people find you, and what are some resources where you get inspiration on RevOps?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. And as we mentioned both in the earlier intro, I'm at flywire.com. And I think, where I get my inspiration, I don't know that there's maybe one specific source, but I look up a lot of topics, try to keep up on upcoming trends or thoughts that are happening, just to keep myself aware of like new tools that are coming, new issues that are popping up, or new trends that are happening. So I don't know that there's one specific.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I
I
guess
think there are communities. They start to pop up, different communities
there's a
like
lot of
RevOpsCo and
communities.
others, right?
Yeah, there's a lot.
I suppose you need to be in the community that is at the same growth stage that you are in, right? Because then you can learn a lot from same peers.
I'm not sure that it has to be the same size,
Mm-hmm.
because you know different size of company could have the same issue as you. It just depends, right? So like, for example, headcount is always a question that comes up. How should you hire more? It's the same calculation, I would say, for like, a small startup versus
Mm-hmm.
size, because they're still, in my mind, we're still running the same math behind it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to figure out whether or not it's a good idea and what's the ROI on headcount, right? But other things, maybe it's industry specific or
Industry.
business model dependent.
That's a good insight. That size not necessarily is that important, but the industry makes sense. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Carol, for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a
Yeah,
small
it's great.
conversation.
No, I love
And
talking about this. So thank you for inviting me.
thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.